Hello, this is Carissa with Scrub Oak Soaps. We are located at 23 Main Street in Meredith, New Hampshire, and you can find us online at scruboaksoaps.com and on Facebook and Instagram as Scrub Oak Soaps. Today I'm working on a loaf of soap, very similar to one that I've shown in a couple of Facebook groups now called Be My Honey. And what that one is a type of melt and pour soap that has both a solid titanium dioxide mix of base that has been colored, so it's opaque. But then I also have one that's a little more transparent in the middle, sort of like a little river running through the middle. And I've been asked by a lot of people how I did this one, so I'm going to show what I did for the technique, doing another type. This one's called Meredith Bay. It's named after the bay that is part of Lake Winnipesaukee, which is right near where my store is located. So what I've done already is I've poured my first layer, and what that is it's going to be this one. It's kind of like a mint green. This one, this is the opaque base. It's just a solid SFIC base that has the titanium dioxide already mixed in, so I don't have to do that part. To be honest, I really don't like working with titanium dioxide. So usually I buy both the clear base and then the white base, and then I just use those separately as needed. So what I've done is I've heated that up already. I'd add my colorant and my fragrance oil and poured my first layer. So that's been cooling for a little while, and I've already melted my second layer. This is going to be the clear layer, and I've added in a bright blue colorant. What I use are, these are mica colorants that have been added. And just mix it with a little bit of rubbing alcohol and then add it to your soap, and you get nice, bright, beautiful colors. So as I'm waiting for this to harden, I'm just checking the hardness of that top layer. And let me pick you up here with me real quick so you can come see. Right now it's kind of at a jello state. You can see as I touch it, it's a little bit liquid still. So I need it to harden just a little bit more before I can start to change this, the property of the top of this layer. And I'd seen a couple of YouTube videos before. Dean Wilson, of course, has a lot of melt and pour soap tutorials, and had a couple of videos, one of which had this sort of a technique. This is similar to the one that he used to do the ocean floor, the deep sea with the sand at the bottom. So what you do is you just wait for it to get to this texture, and as it hardens, it forms this little skin, just like pudding that's been in the fridge too long, which is disgusting, but you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, so what you can see here is as I just touch it with my gloved finger, or you can use a chopstick or a little tool or something, but as I just touch it a little bit by little bit, it starts to change the shape of the layer that's on the top here. You can kind of poke holes and it'll bring a little bit more through from the bottom. You can kind of push it. Okay, sorry about that. My 4-year-old turned off Netflix, and that was an emergency. So anyway, so what I'm doing is I'm just kind of manipulating the top layer of this little skin that's formed on here. And so as it cools, it'll get a little bit harder, and it'll become easier to change the shape of this layer. And as it hardens, I just kind of push down and make little strokes. And you can see again it's changing the shape. Yes, Ev, you may. And it's okay, you can see there are some little tears down in here, like these. That's okay, they don't really show up as tears when you have your finished product. It just adds more dimension to the inside. So I'm just working my way down here. Hey Ab, turn your volume down, please. if we let this sit for a little while longer and cool a little bit more, we'll be able to change the shape of this a little bit better. So it looks like my my next layer is actually hardening up a little bit in the bowl. So I'm going to pop that into the microwave for just a short while. So let me set you down here for a second. And I'll just continue to shape this a little bit more as I'm waiting for that that soap to melt back down a little bit. Of course, the trick with doing this technique is that you're going to have to wait for your soap to cool down a little bit, the liquid soap in the pot. You need to wait for it to get to just about the right temperature. And for me, I tend to do right around 128, 125. Right now we're getting 145. Yeah, 145 is about what it's at right now. So this will have to sit and cool for just a little while longer, 125 to 130, and usually that's not going to be too hot to pour onto this layer once this thin film has formed on the top. So I'm just going to keep making my shapes. And the thing that I like about doing it this way is that it just leaves for an organic shape. I know a lot of people like to do the really nice steep angles and sharp corners on melt and pour soaps. A lot of people like the organic swirls and shapes that you can get in cold process soaps. And where I am right now, the house that we live in doesn't really lend itself to doing cold process very easily. We have a fairly small kitchen, and it's right off of my kid's bedroom, and the only time I really get to do a lot of soap making is when the baby is napping or the kids are asleep at night. And so I tend not to do cold process just because I don't want that stick blender going really loud. I don't want the fumes to get in the way. I don't really want to do any of that right now, so I don't do a lot of cold process right now. Okay, so I'm going to pick this up so you can see a little bit better again. Now the texture is changing as it's gotten a little bit harder, and I just keep on manipulating this top layer here. And you can see that it makes sort of a ripple, wavy sort of layer here. And then once the blue has cooled down a little bit, I will add that to the top of this. Okay, so we're still reading about 137. I'm just going to work some more on the top of this here, just for another minute. Okay, so my temperature reading is coming up still a little bit warm. It went back to 140. I don't know why it went that high again, I guess. Sometimes this glass stovetop is a blessing and a curse. It's really nice because it's easy to clean, and I can sanitize it fairly well by spraying it down with rubbing alcohol real good. And of course, we've got butcher block counters here, and I don't want to put any of my fragrance oils or soaps onto the counters in case anything spills. I don't want those soaking into the wood counters. So I do a lot of work on this, the glass stovetop. But one of the problems that I have is sometimes it will retain the heat. So when I set it back over here to cool some more, it was already warm, so it warmed it back up, which is not what I want. So I'm just going to stir it a little bit more here and bring it down to the correct temperature. I was getting a reading of 140, which was higher than my last reading. So I stir it a little bit to get it back down. Yeah, now we're to 132, 133. It's a little bit better. So I'm going to do one more round of just changing the top layer here. And again, I'm going to pick you up so you can see now it's getting a little more rubbery. So when you manipulate it on the first go around, when it's a really thin film, the first time it'll look a lot more like this, you know, thin film like this. It's very easy to puncture. So when you wait for it to harden a little bit more, it gets more rubbery, and you're able to get more extreme variations in height on the shapes as you manipulate it. So I like to do it a little bit in the first round just to get a little bit of waviness, and then this time around as it's hardened, I just make deeper angles just to get it to look really wavy and really organic. So you can kind of see the texture that I have going on here. And again, it's okay that there are little tears in this. Those are not going to show very much once you do the cut, especially after I pour on this next layer of soap. It's going to, the warmth from that soap is going to kind of smooth it out. So this is just about ready. Let me check my temps on that middle layer one more time. Okay, so I'm getting 128 to 130 on my temperature reading here. So this is where I'm going to do the next layer. Alright, so I slowly pour on top. Oh, wait, I almost forgot. Rubbing alcohol. Rubbing alcohol, if you don't already know, works very good in between layers of melt and pour soap to get them to adhere to one another. It also will kind of smooth out the soap a little bit as you pour it to get it down into any of the crevices, so this is really helpful for a technique like this. And so I start very slowly, just drizzling. I don't want it to be too much too fast unless I want it to break through and do more of a drop swirl appearance, but that's not what I'm going for with this technique. So I just do a little light layer at first, fill in a little bit of the deeper nooks and crannies here. And then as I get the deeper areas filled, I just slowly add a little bit more, little by little. This also helps it to cool a little bit faster, and that way I can start work on the next layer a little bit sooner, which is very helpful, especially since I hear the baby is starting to wake up. Okay, and then spray again with rubbing alcohol just to get out any bubbles. There aren't very many because of the low temperature that I poured at, but this also helps to smooth out the top a little bit. And I'm changing my gloves too real quick just because I don't want, I got a lot of the blue on there that last little bit, and I had green from the previous manipulating that first layer. So this should cool off fairly quick, and because it's a very thin layer. What this is about a 5-pound mold. I ordered this one on eBay, and yes, and of course my 4-year-old wants to help. Okay, so we've got what I put in so far. The bottom layer is about 2 pounds. We did 4 pounds of this green, and then I did 1 pound of the interior. And I'll be honest, this is one way that I work with these bases so that I can use up more of the white base instead of just the clear base. I use a lot of the clear base, and I try to even it out some. So this is a really good good soap for me to use up some of that clear base. I mean, some of that white base. And so I'm just going to heat up my my green that's been sitting here for a little while. It's not going to take very long. Just need to give it a quick zap in the microwave to melt that top little bit of soap that was on there, about 30 seconds. And this is starting to firm up really nicely. Okay, that looks good. I'm just going to slide this back a little bit. I don't want to move it too much. I don't want to shake it and put air bubbles down in there. So let me pick you up here so you can take a look at what this looks like. This is with the second layer on top. That's the clear melt and pour soap with some blue mica added in for color. And I have the fragrance oil in there. So what's on the bottom is about 2 pounds of the white soap. It's a white melt and soap base. White melt and pour soap base. And it's had a little bit of green added to it. So what it'll look like will be this color. So I added that. I manipulated the top of that once it formed a little bit of a skin. And then I put the 1 pound of the clear that has been colored with the blue mica, and I put that on top there. So you can see it's got some really pretty organic swirls and some really nice layering in there. So now all we're waiting for is for that to form the next layer of the little bit of skin on top, so we can manipulate that one too. A good way you can check this is just by dipping your finger. You can also lightly blow on it to see whether or not it's cooling. And this is starting to cool just a little bit. So I'll very gently make changes to the surface of this layer. And you can see this layer cooled a lot quicker just because there was less soap. This was about 1 pound of soap instead of the 2 pounds for the previous layer. I also poured this at a much cooler temperature because the first layer I didn't really need to worry about whether or not it would melt a layer below it. I just poured it at whatever temperature it was when I put the colorant and the fragrance oil in, probably about 140. But by pouring it in and giving it some surface area, that allowed it to cool a little bit faster, just not as quickly as this layer is cooling because there's less of this soap here. So you can see now this has a really fun ripple look to it. It makes it look very watery, which is great because this is going to be, the name of this one, Meredith Bay, is inspired by the little stretch of water that goes from Lake Winnipesaukee down into the town of Meredith, which is where I have my shop. And we have a lot of We have a lot of part-timers that live there, a lot of tourists that come visit, a lot of people that they take pride in what they consider to be their lake. There are many lakes in the Lakes region of New Hampshire. Some very popular ones are Waukesha, Winnipesaukee, Squam, Winnisquam, Newfound Lake. So a lot of these, if I have things named after the areas where people have their homes or take their vacations or go camping, a lot of times they really love that. They love to take home the soap as a souvenir, either for themselves or to bring to friends. So one of the things I like to do is to offer things that smell nice and natural, nice and earthy, or really refreshing, the same way that the Lakes region is, just to help them remind themselves of their vacation. So this is what it looks like now. And I'm going to go through and do one more little manipulation a little bit deeper now that it's cooled off a bit. And you can use your finger, you can use the backside of a pipette. You can use really anything, a spoon if you wanted to do this. But I just use my fingers. It's very easy for me to feel how appropriate it is for what type of changes I want to make to this layer based on the touch. So that's what I prefer to do. Okay, we're just about done here. So I'm going to set this back down, and I'm going to spray one more time with the rubbing alcohol across this so that I can get the next layer to adhere. Oh, don't fall over. Sorry about that. One of the tips that I like to share too when I'm talking about how to make products, whether it's bath bombs, melt and pour soap, one of the things I like to do is take my bottle of rubbing alcohol, and I just have my little spray bottle attachment on top of that. I screw it directly onto that bottle, so I don't have to worry about transferring it over to another bottle. I don't have to worry about spilling when I pour it into the other bottle or anything. This looks like it might need a little more time in the microwave, just a little bit. Yeah, we're down to 124, which is, for different bases are going to have different temperatures at which they start to solidify. And for this one, this is SFIC, which is a very popular base that doesn't have any detergents added, and it's got very few extra ingredients added. So for this one, I find the ideal layering temperature, like I said, to be about 125 to 130. And it's going to vary depending on what type of base you use, what manufacturer you use, and just you have to play with it and figure out what works for you. I know a lot of people like to use the Crafter's Choice. A lot of people use the Stevenson bases. So it's gonna vary depending on what type of base you're using, but just play around with it and you can find that little sweet spot. Yeah, this went chunky on me. So it looks like I'm going to have to melt it just a little bit more.